Smackheads unite, because Union Smack is back to save you from the boredom of lockdown. I am of course your host, the Maniac Matt Tennant, ready to bring you on a voyage across the pond to merry old England for our next retro review of the Coliseum video home release, UK fan favourites. Now, I am hoping that this is the final solo Union Smack and we will have Travis back with us next time. But before we get into the nitty gritty of this week's show, you know how it works by now. You're stalwart, you've been listening to us for long enough. You can find me on Twitter at The Perfect Tenant. You can find Travis on Twitter at The HibickyTMD. Log on to our online shop, unionsmack.bigcartel.com. Grab yourself an official t-shirt. I believe there's going to be some more merchandise coming for the summer months. And of course, go to completelynovel.com where you can purchase a copy of my first book, The Undertaker, A Trip Down Death Valley. I am, as I've said before, working on Book 2, NXT UK Year 1, but with everything that's been going on, I haven't had a lot of time to edit it, but I am getting on it. It's getting there, and as soon as finances allow, then it will be in your hands. Now, after that plug, I of course need a drink, get my voice back on track so it doesn't crack and break as we're going through this, not sure what to call it, this wealth of material from Coliseum video. You just wait. You just wait until you hear some of it, dear God. But while I take a small break and brace for what's to come, as should all of you, here is Travis with a special performance of the Bruiserweight Pete Dunne's theme tune, and I will catch you on the other side. And in the words of Heath Ledger's Joker, here we go. I hope you are all strapped in. There's going to be turbulence. It's going to be a bumpy ride. But this is the Coliseum video release of UK Fan Favourites 1993. Now, we kick off with our hosts, Mean Gene Oakland and Bobby the Brain Heenan. Yes, they strike again. This is the first time we've seen them since, I believe it was WrestleFest 93, when they broke down on the highway and spent the entire release trying to fix the car, only to find out there was a small gerbil in the engine, like you do. But they have made it to the United Kingdom. At least they want us to believe they have. They are, in fact, stood in front of a map of the UK. It's better than nothing, I suppose. And they're sorting through airmail from fans. Now, the way I believe this works, because I was never too sure as a kid, and I said this last week on our German fan favourites review, is the fans who read the WWF magazine, which they really should bring back because it was a highlight of the month. But the fans who read it could then write in to, I think it was WWF magazine, who would then pass on the suggestions to Coliseum Home Video of matches they'd like to see. Now, I know this was how it was done for the German fan favourites. However, I was a regular buyer of WWF magazine when I was a child. My granddad used to buy it for me every month, and I don't ever remember there being an advert or an article in there that said, write in with your suggestions for matches for a Coliseum Home Video release. If there had have been, I would have remembered this. And not only would I have remembered this, but I would have written in. 100% I would have written in. But I just never ever remember one. Now, if anyone listening has like old copies of WWF magazine from 92 to the beginning of 93, then have a look for me. Have a look and see if there are any adverts in there that ask you to actually write in and suggest matches. Because I'd love to be proved wrong, because I'd love to see the article. And if possible, send me a screenshot and either DM me it on Twitter or tweet it to me on Twitter at The Perfect Tenant. Mean Gene Okerlund introduces us to this Coliseum home video release, and Bobby the Brain Heenan is behind him, and he has an arm full of letters. It's like they're spilling over, and he wants to steam them open because, in his own words, you never know what's inside. Great line. Gene reads out a request, and the first request is for Bret the Hitman Hart versus Fatu of the Head Shrinkers. This is a WWF Championship match, and it is taken from Monday Night Raw in 1993. Now, Jim Ross is on commentary here. He sadly calls the Head Shrinkers the Headhunters, though he does quickly correct himself. This match is very good. And I know I sound surprised at that, but in 1993, like the Head Shrinkers were just solely a tag team. They weren't really known for their singles competition, though Samu had a singles run in the WWF in the 80s. I can't remember what his name was now. I had it written down for Fire Pro Wrestling, but it escapes me now. But Fatu here holds his own. He shows potential for what he'd go on to become, as Rikishi, etc. Bret works Fatu well in the early going with some nice technical holds, arm bars, etc. And then something I've not seen from Bret Hart a lot over the years. He goes into the ropes, Fatu ducks, and then Bret sort of trips over Fatu and pretends to hurt his knee. But it's all a ruse so he can snag Fatu in an inside cradle. We never ever saw this Bret Hart as WWF champion the first time around. He was always put in long matches with lesser talent and made to fight from behind, which hurt his first title run, in my opinion at least. And though his second title run would be more of the same of that, we began to see an evolution in Bret Hart, where he'd display different characteristics. He'd do a few things in the ring differently to set him apart from Intercontinental Champion Bret Hart, if you like. Fatu controls this match well when it's his turn, and then the tables turn because out comes Samu, Afa already at ringside. Samu attacks Bret Hart, falling headbutt, I should say, on the outside. I think he breaks Bret's nose because Bret is bleeding heavily from that moment on. And it basically turns into a handicap match. Now, I know what you're thinking. Not only have we got to sit through a rerun of a match from Monday Night Raw, but we've now got to sit through your bog standard 2-on-1 heels cheat to win match. You couldn't be further from the truth. Even though this does turn into a handicap match at times, it's done so well and so believably that Bret comes out of this looking like $1 million, and I don't really think the Head Shrinkers lose anything in defeat. The blood makes it more dramatic and makes a more credible challenger of Fatu, in a way, as does Bret's selling. Referee's distracted by Afa. Bret Hart puts a sharpshooter on Fatu. Samu gets in, breaks up the sharpshooter, and they do the old twin magic. And who thought we'd ever hear the words Head Shrinkers and twin magic in the same sentence? Samu breaks up the sharpshooter and then pins Bret himself while covering his head so the referee cannot see. Referee falls for it, even though, I have to say, referees in 93 were just as dumb as referees in the present day, because even though he couldn't see Samu's head, the word or the name Samu was written clearly and visibly down the left side of his tights. So why the ref, didn't pick that up is beyond me. We just want a bit of logic from our wrestling. We would just like it to make sense. It is a nice little moment though, and you genuinely believe that Fatu will beat Bret Hart and become the next WWF champion. However, Bret Hart outsmarts them. Samu gets his head caught in the ropes. Hitman hits Afa with a dropkick, and Bret wins by submission with the sharpshooter. This was a very, very good little match. It didn't go too long. I think there's a few cuts in it. But do go back and watch this match, especially if you haven't seen much of Monday Night Raw from 1993. It wasn't all, Yokozuna versus Koko Beware. It wasn't all Damien Demento. There were some gems like this on it. Next up, we stay with matches from Monday Night Raw, sadly. Because like I said on the last video, fan favourites, German fan favourites too, sorry. I prefer these Coliseum video releases to be more fresh matches recorded from house shows and not things we've already seen. But it got to a point in 1993 where they were recording, less and less new material for these releases on house shows, and were just giving us matches from Raw, Superstars, Wrestling Challenge, etc. Terry Taylor, the terrific one, Terry Taylor, versus Mr. Perfect, Curt Hennig. This was very good in the beginning, actually, and you won't find me saying that about a Terry Taylor match often. They hit a fast pace. Mr. Perfect nearly puts his boot through Taylor's face, and then it sort of just all slows down to a crawl. Taylor bails to the outside. The pace of the match dips. Mr. Perfect sort of doesn't really know how to get it going again. And bear in mind, this isn't 88-89 Mr. Perfect, who would have been able to turn it on, like a tap. This is 93 Mr. Perfect. This is almost done with WWF Mr. Perfect. He'd go until, I believe, summer 1993. He'd have that match against Shawn Michaels at King of the Ring, and no, he wouldn't. He'd have that match against Shawn Michaels at SummerSlam, and then it would all peter out for him, and he'd be gone by Survivor Series. There are chants of "We Want Bret" in this, which are very distracting for both the wrestlers and us watching at home. Taylor grabs an advantage by pulling Perfect through the ropes. I don't want to say this about a Mr. Perfect match, because Curt Hennig was one of the best in-ring talents to ever lace up a pair of boots. Undisputable. He was one of the greatest Intercontinental Champions of all time. Indisputable. In fact, I'd put him in my top 5 Intercontinental Champions of all time. But this grows old because Terry Taylor has a lot of the advantage. And when he does, it's punches, it's rest holds, and it's very little else. Now, Terry Taylor, let's not take anything away from him. He was a very good in-ring talent in his time. But by 93, the Red Rooster gimmick had killed off most of what made him special. And then he'd come back, I think, from WCW as Terrific Terry Taylor. Same outfit, same attire, same wrestling moves, apart from I think he used a different finisher. And that was it. No one cared about him. Everyone still remembered the Red Rooster. And he died a death. Mr. Perfect builds momentum here, but down comes Ric Flair and attacks Perfect behind the referee's back to set up their Loser Leaves WWF match, which we reviewed on WrestleFest 93. Do go back and watch that match if you've still not seen it. It's an absolute classic. Perfect is rolled back inside. Taylor goes to grab a suplex even, and Perfect reverses it into the Perfectplex for a victory. Now, you don't need to go out of your way to watch this match. It's nothing special. If you're watching the release anyway, then keep it on. It's not horrible. It's just a standard Raw match. We are taken back to Mean Gene Okerlund and Bobby the Brain Heenan. Bobby Heenan won't let Gene have any of the letters and drops them all. That's basically the link to the next match, which is Bam Bam Bigelow versus The Undertaker. We reviewed a Bam Bam Bigelow versus Undertaker match on German Fan Favourites 2 last week. Thankfully, this isn't the same match. This is actually a lot better. This was taped during a WWF Superstars taping. And though it features, I'm not going to say the same logic or the same moveset or even the same format, there are moments in here which do make it feel like the match we saw last week. For example, Undertaker executes a nice drop toe hold, nails a lovely DDT on the rope rebound, which looks marvellous. Bigelow takes that really well. They both do well to work around Bigelow's size and the Undertaker's limitations. And it sounds stupid, I know, but they almost wrestle in sound bites. You know, there's no long drawn out rest holds here or long exchanges or chain wrestling. It's move, 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 little break, move, 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 little break, and that's how it continues on. And I think it serves the match better and makes it a little more memorable than if they'd gone move, 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 rest hold, move, 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 rest hold. I can't explain it properly, but if you watch this match, you'll know exactly what I mean. The Undertaker misses a flying clothesline to give Bam Bam Bigelow the advantage. He ends up on the outside. Bigelow slams him on the floor and then uses the post and steel steps to punish the Undertaker, who does a fantastic job of looking genuinely in trouble here. He's woozing around like he's the last drunk in Glasgow on a Saturday night, and it's all very believable. I will say at this point, however, would it have killed WWF to cancel the whole Giant Gonzalez feud and give us a few months of these two? I would have much preferred Bigelow versus The Undertaker at WrestleMania 9. I would have preferred a 6-month Bam Bam Bigelow versus Undertaker feud to anything Mark Calloway did with Giant Gonzalez. And plus, I think Taker would have learned so much more from Scott Bigelow. More so than he ever learnt from Gonzalez or Mr. Hughes, etc. Bigelow versus The Undertaker is a long-term feud I would have very, very much liked to have seen. The match descends into a repeat of the last match in the final few minutes. Undertaker keeps getting up. Bam Bam hits a series of headbutts, then misses his flying headbutt, and then the Undertaker nails a choke slam as Bam Bam Bigelow bails to avoid a pinfall. Undertaker wins this by count out. Of course he does. It's a Coliseum video home release, and to be honest, I lost count of the amount of screwy finishes on this. And following the match, the Giant Gonzalez stands in the aisle, and the Undertaker goes to meet him as referees try to keep them apart. And then Gonzalez just walks away. Fair match. Good big band match. I would have liked to have seen more of these two. And I'd have liked them to have been given a little more time. Every time we see them battle, it's short. And I'm pretty confident that Bigelow could have helped carry The Undertaker to a pay-per-view classic. Next is El Matador, Tito Santana, versus the man who graces our thumbnail this week. The model, Rick Martel. Now this, for the people who don't know, was a never-ending feud between the Strikeforce members. And yes, I went back and I counted. I went through the entirety of Rick Martel's match history on cagematch.net. Do use it if you're writing a book or researching anything. It is absolutely fantastic. It's got every match anyone ever had. And these two, between 1989, when Strikeforce split, and 1993, when both the El Matador character and the Rick Martel character really began to wind down, these two fought each other 73 times on house shows, televisions, and I believe on pay-per-view in a six-man at SummerSlam 1989. 73 matches. Can you imagine? I'm glad we didn't have to see even a fraction of them. But the fact that they went to war 73 times, just absolutely hideous. Rick Martel works the back of Santana here, as Jim Ross says erroneously that both men were Intercontinental Champion, but Rick Martel never was. Matador makes the standard face comeback, hits a flying forearm, but Martel rolls out the ring to avoid the pinfall. The referee, for some reason, stops El Matador going after Martel here, which is ridiculous. And that gives Martel the distraction he needs to nail Matador with the atomizer, and the bout is awarded to Tito Santana by disqualification. I had a problem with this. Not that it was another screwy finish, which it was, but the fact that if you watch it back, he absolutely leathers Tito Santana with the atomizer, and yet seconds later, Santana is back up as if nothing has happened. I don't remember this man selling much, and in fact, casting our mind back to our WrestleFest 93 review, I don't actually believe he sold the Razor's Edge for a massive period of time either. So that was definitely a weakness in Tito Santana's game. As for the match, it was standard. Formulaic, standard house show match. You can watch it, but you won't get much from it. It's the best way I can describe it. We take our standard 2-match break. Just throw back to Mean Gene Okerlund and Bobby the Brain Heenan, who take the piss here and say that we've seen some terrific action so far. We've seen some good action so far. 3 out of 4 of these matches have been good to great, I'm going to say. But now Bobby Heenan lightens up proceedings. They get a letter from a guy from a town in England called Stoke-on-Trent. I can't remember the guy's name who wrote in, but it's a weird name. And Bobby Heenan absolutely rips into him as Gene reads it out and then makes fun of Stoke-on-Trent. That is a very nice, amusing moment on this release. What isn't a nice, amusing moment is what's up next. Because we're back to Monday Night Raw for an Intercontinental Championship match between champion Shawn Michaels and challenger Hacksaw Jim Duggan. Oh yes, I heard the distinguishable moans from our audience as I mentioned Jim Duggan's name. Now, like I said, this is from Raw. This is 1993 Blue Singlet Jim Duggan. And I find it bizarre. And it took a while to get that word out, but I find it absolutely bizarre that people still bought into Hacksaw Jim Duggan in 1993. Bear in mind, he'd been around the WWF since, I think it was late 87. Maybe before that. He'd been doing the same gimmick, the same hoe, the same USA 2x4, same moveset, same Duggan match for the past 7 years. And yet they were still mad for him. And I get the whole patriotic thing, etc., but there comes a point where evolution moves on and you see these wrestlers for what they are. In 88, Duggan was fine. Not in the ring, but Duggan was fine character. In 93, with the Michaelses, the Harts, the Undertakers, etc., Duggan was old hat, and the WWF audience didn't really see that. It baffles me to this day. Now, to cover for Jim Duggan's flaws, the pair take so much time in the beginning playing to and working the crowd with chants of USA, hose, not the good kind of hose either. The free hose that get on your nerves. I've spent too long on hose and said the word hoe too many times in one sentence. Michaels rolls out the ring. It takes a long time to get going. And even worse, this match feels double the length that it actually is. Like I say, Michaels tries to walk away after almost zero offense, but Duggan rolls out, brings him back in. Michaels works over Duggan with chin locks, punches, a flying double axe handle and elbow drops. It's all very, very boring. And I'm surprised at Shawn Michaels because he had much more in his arsenal than this that he could have used to carry Jim Duggan, if you like. But he chose to go with the punches and the chin locks. And I have no idea why. Maybe Duggan couldn't do the rest of Shawn Michaels' arsenal. He was noticeably heavier here and was about to enter the storyline with Yokozuna. And still, can you believe they put Jim Duggan in a storyline with Yokozuna? And for those who don't remember that, just going off track quickly, this would be where Yokozuna crushed Duggan with multiple banzai drops. And that is one of the resounding sound bites of my childhood. Watching that at home, I was with my grandmother, I remember clearly. I think my parents were at work. This was 6 p.m. in the evening when Superstars used to air in the UK. And I just remember watching Yokozuna over and over again just banzai drop Duggan. And as a kid, I was genuinely shocked at that. Watching it back now, I believe I'd just be like, yeah, crush him. Not mercilessly, obviously. But I think you know where I'm coming from. Duggan looks absolutely fucked after only a few minutes in this match. He hits his 3-point stance, which sends Michaels tumbling to the outside. Duggan follows. They fight around ringside. And Duggan backdrops Michaels into the crowd, causing Michaels to bail backstage. And guess what the outcome of this was? That's right, Coliseum home video fans. This was Jim Duggan victory via countout. Now, putting aside the fact that he gets back in the ring, sits there and refuses to move until Michaels comes back out to lose properly. 1993. Okay, I don't need to keep repeating that date to you. The WWF has evolved. It's moved on. No longer are there any jacked up muscle men on the roster, thanks to the Vince McMahon drugs trial. Hulk Hogan is almost a distant memory. Actual professional wrestling has taken over the 80s brawling style, if you like. Even though there was still some of that present from various wrestlers. Who, in 1993, sees Jim Duggan as such a draw that they have to put him over the current reigning Intercontinental Champion? And I don't care whether this was via countout, pinfall, submission, disqualification. The fact is that Jim Duggan beat the Intercontinental Champion in 1993. I might have understood if this was 88, 89, possibly 90. But 1993, absolutely terrible. Oh, and speaking of terrible, this release does not get any better. In fact, it's downhill for a while from here. Because next up, Next up is the Berserker versus Virgil. And I wish Travis was here to rip into this with me. The last Virgil match we saw on one of these Coliseum home video releases was Virgil versus Shawn Michaels for the Intercontinental Championship, and that was very, very good. This is almost the exact opposite. So bad is this match that Jim Ross on commentary prefers to talk about milk and cheese that they make in the area where this match is being shot. So that tells you something. Nothing is important here. Everything is done and sold so lethargically that it's almost as if they're just running through the match, ready for later on. Virgil does hit a near fall with a good sunset flip, I'll give him that, credit where credit's due. And then the rest of the match is basically the Berserker beating on Virgil, and it's inane. If we had to see this, if Marty Applebaum, or whoever took over from Marty Applebaum, was so intent on showing us Virgil versus the Berserker, and whoever requested this match wants a fucking slap. But if Marty was so intent on putting this on the release, it should have been like Virgil's SummerSlam 1992 match with Nails. It should have been a 2 and a bit minute squash, nothing important, just a little respite from all the lengthy matches we've seen so far. But it's not. Virgil makes a comeback, and it's nothing really special. We've seen it a million times. Pops the crowd, though. And I just find it amusing now. Now, when we were kids, Virgil as the $1 Million Man's bodyguard / butler, it was believable because Virgil could stand on the apron and look menacing, and he didn't have to do much apart from, maybe take a bump now and again. But looking at 93 Virgil, 92 Virgil, even 94 Virgil, that this man was ever a bodyguard for anyone. And you now see that, if anything kicked off, DiBiase would have been fucked, because he is absolutely useless. Lovely man, by the way. I have met Virgil in person. I have a picture of me with Virgil. I'll see if I can dig it out. You'll be looking at it now if I can. Lovely, lovely man. Some great stories to tell. Shit wrestler. The finale of this match, the Berserker grabs his sword. Of course he does, because you definitely need a sword to beat Virgil. And almost takes his fucking head off with it. Virgil wins by disqualification, because that is apparently enough to warrant a disqualification. But on the last VHS, Tatanka attacking Bam Bigelow in the aisle during his match with The Undertaker wasn't. And I'm not sure which was the bigger shock. Virgil getting the win by disqualification, or the fact that the Berserker just brought a weapon into the ring to cause the disqualification. Back again to Mean Gene Okerlund versus Bobby the Brain Heenan. And at this point in the VHS, I am absolutely not sure how many more days this lasts for. They get a letter from somewhere in Fiji. Now this... oh dear. Whoever puts this together, whether it was Marty or someone else, have absolutely no idea about the United Kingdom. This is meant to be letters and requests from people in the UK. Fiji is so far away from the United Kingdom that I couldn't even point it out to you on a map. But this is done just so Bobby Heenan thinks it's from Mr. Fuji. You see where it's going? Then they pick out another letter. It's all becoming tiresome now, these links. Even though Bobby Heenan's there, it's becoming very, very hard to sit through. They get a letter from somebody in Nottingham, and that leads them on to a minute's conversation about the Sheriff of Nottingham. Ha ha, ha ha. For as Tiresome as that was getting, though, this next match was a gem. Macho Man Randy Savage versus the Nature Boy Ric Flair for the WWF Championship. And thankfully, this wasn't taken from WrestleMania 8. This wasn't taken from any other taping. This match was recorded exclusively for this release. It is from June 1992, after WrestleMania 8 and their epic collision. Honestly, if you've never seen Ric Flair and Randy Savage at WrestleMania 8, you are doing yourself a disservice. It is an amazing, amazing match on a dire card. Randy Savage goes after Mr. Perfect to begin with, gives Ric Flair the advantage. Flair goes to use a steel chair, but Earl Hebner just does a Superman and jumps off the apron, takes the chair out of Ric Flair's hand and disarms him. Flair then gets into a shoving match with Earl, which gives Mr. Perfect time on the outside to attack Randy Savage. Flair tries to hook his feet on the rope for the pin, dirtiest player in the game, don't forget. And then Savage takes a big hit when Mr. Perfect rams his leg into the post. Cue it, a lot of leg work from Ric Flair. Randy Savage battles back valiantly, clothesline over the top rope, an arsenal of clotheslines and diving double axe handles, which, obviously not the best idea when you've got an injured leg. Mr. Perfect then throws Ric Flair brass knuckles, and Ric Flair knocks Savage Spark out. By this point, I have to highlight this. There is a very odd feeling about this match. It's not a patch on their WrestleMania outing, okay? But it feels very oddly placed here, like maybe it should have been the main event. I don't know, I can't put my finger on it. For me, it's that they know that they're doing this solely for the VHS release, and so they don't give it as much. Savage is selling, still spot on, no problems with that. Ric Flair, though, it's almost like this is a watered down version of the Nature Boy we were used to seeing in 93 and before. Very, very odd feeling. The end comes when Ric Flair holds Randy Savage as Mr. Perfect goes to hit him with the WWF Championship, but Earl Hebner grabs the belt and calls for a disqualification and a Randy Savage victory. Again, nothing to really warrant a disqualification here. Perfect only grabbed the belt. The ref didn't see Perfect hand Flair the brass knuckles. He didn't see Perfect wrap Savage's leg around the post. So I don't think intent is enough to call a disqualification. But obviously, this was 93. This was a home video exclusive. And bizarrely enough, this was the 5th match in a row to end on a screwy finish. Absolutely unbelievable. And it was for the WWF Championship, no less. I told you it didn't get any better, didn't I? Lex Luger, the narcissist Lex Luger, versus El Matador Tito Santana. Why would you request this? And why would you want 2 El Matador matches on one tape? Let alone one narcissist Lex Luger match on one tape. He definitely upped his game when he became the man made in the USA, Lex Luger. But narcissist Lex Luger was absolutely dire between the ropes. Even worse, and you're going to hear that quite a bit over the next, next hour or so. On commentary, we have Gorilla Monsoon and Lord Alfred Hayes, because these people never, ever learn. And as soon as Alfred Hayes speaks, thankfully, I think he's only on commentary for this one match only, instantly you lose all hope and interest in this match, actually. Tito Santana does some nice arm drags, which Luger takes well, but this is every Lex Luger heel match in the WWF. And I mean that. Every match he's ever had as the narcissist, same format as this. And on top of that, it's very, very house show. I'm not going to delve into this match much at all because it's very, very dull. And to make it worse, by about 5 minutes in, Alfred Hayes is clearly struggling for things to say about Lex Luger. What I did notice, however, and something struck me while I was watching this, I always found it amazing how they made Lex Luger wear an elbow pad when he was a heel, but never made him wear it when he was a babyface. It was the same bionic elbow, if you like, the same reconstructed elbow with a plate in it. Why should he have to wear it as a heel and not as a face? He could still use it. Who knew? And what heel wouldn't request that a babyface wear an elbow pad, even if it was just to get a bit of heat on them? No logic whatsoever. Absolutely no. This match is fine when Tito Santana has a little flurry towards the end. Luger kicks out of a flying forearm and then wins with a running elbow of his own. Of course, it's the reconstructed elbow. Of course, it's the elbow with a plate in. But the one redeeming feature is that this does have a pinfall ending. The first match in 6 to do so, but it at least has a pinfall ending. Isn't it sad when that's the best thing you can say about a wrestling match? Just like clockwork, we are back with Mean Gene Okerlund and Bobby Heenan. I don't know why, because they're quickly running out of material. They run through the countries that make up the United Kingdom. Sadly, though, whoever wrote this doesn't really know the United Kingdom, as we've established before, because they completely miss out Wales. Bobby Heenan says that he will never go to Paisley. Paisley in Scotland is where the next request has come from. And he compares bagpipes to a Hoover bag. As droll as this sounds, Heenan actually executes it very well, and he's on the verge of corpsing here. So it's not the greatest link in the world, but compared to all the other links we've had on this VHS release, it's at least a little better. What isn't a little better, though, is the next match. Another inane request. Papa Shango versus Tatanka. Who the fuck would ask for this? Like, seriously, this is up there with the request for Tatanka versus Crush from the German fan favourites last week. Papa Shango attacks from behind. Stomp, punch, stomp, chop. That's the match. And to make matters worse, he then applies a nerve hold, which it must last 2 minutes. Kills the match, stone dead. Any interest that anyone may have had in this, just gone after that. Tatanka hits 2 fairly decent drop kicks, a crossbody, 2 tomahawks and a flying tomahawk, and then Shango tries to use the voodoo stick. Tatanka catches it, but fireworks explode from the end. Don't touch Tatanka, by the way. Tatanka avoids them, but disqualification. Of course it is. Tatanka wins. Terrible ending. Match felt like an hour. And it's just another shit match with another shit ending on this release. And I will count for you, when we finish, when we're all done, how many shit endings in correlation to how many matches there were. Thankfully, we get a moment's reprieve with the next bout. The Mountie versus The Undertaker. Now, this is 92 Undertaker, and I know what people are thinking, like, how can this be any good? But Jacques Rougeau carries Mark Calloway here really, really well. He starts to mock The Undertaker as he gets in the ring. Undertaker there's some kicks at the beginning of this. He sells them quite oddly, almost as if he's being pushed backwards by a lorry, very slowly. Very weird to explain unless you watch it. Undertaker hits an overhead press, which looked marvellous. I don't think I've seen him use that more than 4 or 5 times in his entire career. The Mountie avoids the Undertaker and goes after Paul Bearer to cause a distraction. Taker then gets out. They do the little switch where the Mountie rolls back in. Mountie tries to slingshot the Undertaker back into the ring, but the Undertaker reverses it, won't budge, and he actually slingshots the Mountie to the outside of the ring. Jacques Rougeau, absolute marvel here. Honestly, to see it on paper, you'd think this is going to be, a 12-minute bore. This is very, very good because of one man. The Mountie uses a steel chair and then hits a lovely trifecta of pile drivers, which not only look great, but Mark Calloway, he takes them to perfection. For someone so green to take a move like that so well, credit where it's due. The Mountie wastes time. He doesn't pin the Undertaker after the third pile driver. He gets on the microphone and proclaims that he is the Mountie. That gives the Undertaker the opening to get up, hits the flying clothesline. The Mountie then bails, but halfway up the aisle, Sergeant Slaughter comes out to stop him. Mountie back in. The Undertaker turns him around for the tombstone and for the victory. This was very, very good. Could it have done without some of the padding here and there? Yes, but in a way that sort of led to the match instead of detracted from it. Really do go out of your way to see this. It is 92. It is 92 Green Undertaker, but Jacques Rougeau, wow. What a job. We are now in the final furlong, the home stretch, if you like, of UK fan favourites 1993. But sadly, the beginning of the home stretch just does not start well. 2 matches left. One of them, I can't believe they booked this. Repo Man versus the Macho Man, Randy Savage. This is from Monday Night Raw. And this, ladies and gentlemen, in case you don't remember, for those of us that do, and still having therapy for it, came about from a story where the Repo Man stole Randy Savage's hat. Yep. Match itself was shit. And you don't say that often about a Randy Savage match, but this was 7 shades of shit. Savage attacks from the beginning. He doesn't let up. Sends Repo to the outside with a running knee. Repo Man tries to leave. And I've lost count of the amount of wrestlers who tried to leave during their match on this tape. Repo Man has some offense, but it's all very dull. It's all chin locks and just punches. And this goes so much longer than it needed to. 11 minutes 14. You could have cut this by about 7 minutes at least. It's 1993, let's not forget. Repo Man has nothing left to do in WWF. They have literally 0 plans for him. He's just an enhancement talent. So there's no reason he should control a large portion of this against someone like Randy Savage. Even worse, Gorilla Monsoon on commentary alludes to Randy Savage defending the WWF Championship here and being champion, but he wasn't. He wasn't. Bret Hart was champion. Oh dear. However, I see where Monsoon got his wires crossed, because Randy Savage and Repo Man did have another match on a different Coliseum video release when Savage was WWF champion. That was a much better match than this. But I think someone should have given Gorilla a nudge and told him sort of what day of the week it was. Naturally, Randy Savage wins with a flying elbow. And do you know what? At least it had a pinfall ending. We are back to Mean Gene Okerlund and Bobby the Brain Heenan to introduce us to the last match and sort of wrap it up and round it off, even though they would appear again after the main event. They say that they have gone through over 120,000 letters, and Bobby Heenan says that if there's no money in them, then he throws them away. Great line. He makes fun of Wolverhampton, England, which is a great little moment, and obviously where the final request comes from. And the final match request is Intercontinental Championship match, Bret Hart versus Shawn Michaels. And good main event. Good way to end it. Personally, I'd have probably ended it on Savage versus Flair, but this is just as good. This is from April 1992, just after Bret Hart beat Rowdy Roddy Piper for the Intercontinental Championship at WrestleMania 8. As you'd expect from these two, 92, in their prime, great chain wrestling, technical holds. Bret helps to sort of guide and mould and carry Shawn through this. A buckle shot and a sensational Sherry cheap shot gives Shawn Michaels control. Both men work to make this interesting, with Shawn cheating to stay on top. The pace, it moves at a good clip, and there's drama. Shawn looks like he will derail Bret and win the championship, which wouldn't have been a bad thing for his career, actually. We just wouldn't have got the British Bulldog 1992 SummerSlam ending that we got had that happened. Finale to this match does bring it down slightly though. Bret puts a sleeper onto Shawn, and then both men tumble through the ropes to the outside. Shawn is back in first. He knocks Bret from the apron and gets the count-out victory. Shawn Michaels goes over the Intercontinental Champion by count-out and then poses afterwards with the belt, but Bret attacks and gets his heat back, if you like. Shit finish, another screwy finish, and that is 7 screwy finishes out of 12 matches on this tape. Unfucking-believable. Do check that match out though. Apart from the end, it's a very good encounter. Very good early entry into their rivalry, and much better than the steel cage match that opened up the German fan favourite last week. To end the release, we are back with Gene Oakland, Mean Gene, whatever you prefer to call him, and Bobby the Brain Heenan. Mean Gene tries to catch a whole bunch of mail, but they hit Bobby Heenan in the face. Cue much hilarity. Cue the end of the video, the show, the release. And cue the end of this week's Union Smack. What would I grade this? That is a very good question. Had there not been so many screwy finishes, I think this would have been a much better overall product. But I'm going to have to give this a C-. There were some really good things on this. Bret Hart versus Fatu, Bret Hart versus Shawn Michaels, Randy Savage versus Ric Flair, Undertaker versus Mountie. Some really good surprises and diamonds in the rough. But the fact that you've got 12 matches on a 2.5 hour release and 7 of them end in DQ, count out, it's laughable even for a Coliseum home video release. So C-. Check out the good stuff from this, avoid the bad stuff as always, and thank you very, very much for listening to me rabbit on for nearly an hour. Like I said, fingers crossed, next week Travis will be back. If he isn't, then maybe we will do UK Fan Favourites 2. I have that on DVD. That has a Bulldog match on it, and this doesn't, surprisingly. Because the British Bulldog was there from 1991 to 1993, yet no one requested a British Bulldog match. All these requests came in from England and not one came in for a British Bulldog match. So maybe if Travis isn't back, we will venture there next week. If not, keep an eye on my Twitter, @ThePerfectTenant. Keep an eye on Travis's Twitter, @TheHabickyTMD. And we will tell you what is coming next week for our first show back together in over a month. Log on to unionsmack.bigcartel.com, pick yourself up a t-shirt, help independent creators, and go to completelynovel.com where you can purchase a copy of my book, The Undertaker a trip down Death Valley. Again, support independent writers and independent artists. We are the backbone of the IWC and the world, in fact. You won't get the takes we give you from a corporate company. Until next week, ladies and gentlemen, once again, thank you very much. Tune in to Muted with myself and Bubba. Tune in to a Major League podcast of their own with myself and TJ. And of course, the alternative with James Hebert and Colin. Travis will be back across the board very, very shortly. But until then, cheerio, mates.